Hey guys, Coach Dylan Allen from Allen Nurse Coaching. Today we're talking about breathing rhythm, and full breath drills to get maximal gas exchange. So first up, a little lesson in physiology. Breathing rhythm and having a full breath is important because of the gas exchange between our bloodstream and the outside air. The more oxygen we can exchange between the air and our bloodstream, the more oxygen we can get to our muscles to drive the aerobic engines in our muscles that we use for our endurance athletics, whether it's running, biking, swimming, whatever. But the more oxygen we have coming into our lungs and into our bloodstream, we can transfer to the mitochondria in our cells. Now, related to that is the amount of CO2 in our lungs. You know, there's only so much volume in there, so the more that's filled up with CO2, the less we can fill up with oxygen. 100%. In order to add something, you got to cut something. Fun fact, the burning feeling in your lungs when you're working real hard isn't a need for oxygen, it's the need to get rid of CO2. It's acidic and it hurts. In order to get effective transfer of CO2 to your lungs so you can exhale it, or oxygen from your lungs into your bloodstream, we have to have a concentration gradient. The bloodstream comes right up against those sacs in our lungs. It's a really thin barrier. It's a real thin, super thin barrier that allows gas exchange across it, similar to dialysis tubing. Now, the bigger the difference is in the concentration of any substance from one side to the other, the faster that substance is going to flow across that membrane. So if there's not a lot of oxygen in our bloodstream, then it's easy to get oxygen from our lungs into the bloodstream. And if there's a big difference in the ratio of CO2 in our lungs, the ratio of CO2 in our bloodstream, then it will also transfer faster. So the important part here is that by creating a bigger differential will allow for greater gas exchange. So if there's not as much CO2 in our lungs because we exhaled more of the air CO2 that was in there on our last breath before we inhaled again, that means that more CO2 will be able to come out of our bloodstream, and more of that oxygen that is making up a greater proportion of the 100% of the air in our lungs will be able to get into our bloodstream and connect with our red blood cells so they can be transported to our muscles and used for energy production. But this concentration gradient is really important. It is the reason why we need to take big, deep, full breaths while we're working aerobically. Because if we don't, and we take shallow breaths, we're only breathing up here in our upper chest, we're only going to be using half of our lungs. Two, we're not going to get as much of the CO2 in our lungs out, because we're not able to get 100% collapse of our lungs when we're exhaling. And there's always going to be some residual amount of air in our lungs every time we exhale. And so if we're inhaling and exhaling, we're never getting zero, but we're in this range. If we're breathing real shallow, we're not exchanging a lot of air. So we're not getting rid of a lot of CO2, and we're not bringing a lot of oxygen in. Now, if we take a deeper breath, we're breathing in big, we're breathing out big, we're still going to have that same residual at the bottom that we're not exchanging, but on each breath, more of that total volume is going to be fresh air coming in from the outside, which means that oxygen concentration is going to be higher, which means we're going to be able to get more oxygen into our lungs and into our bloodstream. The first step is taking full, deep breaths. And we can practice this with our belly breathing drill, which we can do laying down and then standing up. And then you can practice it while you're running, but it is more difficult to run with good mechanics while you're paying attention to what your stomach is doing while you're running. The objective with doing the belly breathing drill while laying down is to maximize the range of motion we have in our stomach because of the movement of our diaphragm. We put one hand on our chest and one hand on our stomach so we can feel the difference. And when we inhale, our stomach should extend super high. And when we exhale, It should really flatten out. And we can do this drill several times. So, if you notice, I have a pretty big range of motion in my stomach. Whereas if I was someone who wasn't belly breathing, I wouldn't have any motion at all. If I'm breathing using just my chest, it'll look like this instead. And obviously we're getting some gas exchange there, but it's nowhere near as much as when I was breathing with my belly. So now we can do the same drill standing up. Put one hand on our stomach, one hand on our chest, and again, if you notice if I breathe with just my lungs, just the top of my lungs, you can see my rib cage goes up and down. But it's nothing compared to the amount of gas exchange I get when I breathe with my full diaphragmatic breathing. Bring that diaphragm all the way down. And notice when I'm doing the belly breathing, I'm still expanding my rib cage. I'm still using my lungs. I'm still using the tops of my lungs. I'm just also using the bottom half of my lungs. So I'm getting the maximal amount of gas exchange. And you can do the same drill while running. Obviously while you're running, you probably don't want to put your hand on your stomach. But while you're running, you can pay attention to breathing and paying attention to your stomach moving in and out versus just breathing with the top part of your chest. If you breathe just top part of your chest, you're only going to be using about 1/3 of your lung capacity. Which means if your hard workouts are feeling really hard, you can probably get almost 3 times as much work in terms of physics, 3 times as much work in for the same amount of breathing if you just use belly breathing. You can make workouts so much easier, and you could run so much faster for so much longer if you just take full deep breaths. Step 2 to effective breathing is having a rhythm. A lot of runners, when they first start, even a lot of the experienced runners I've worked with, they don't have a rhythm to their breathing. They just kind of suck and blow, and the harder they work, the faster they're breathing. Which can work as long as you're taking those full breaths. But if you're running, you're just taking little short, shallow breaths, and you're essentially hyperventilating, you're not getting any gas exchange. This is why you pass out when you hyperventilate, because you're not actually getting rid of any CO2 and getting any oxygen in. You're not getting any oxygen in, so you pass out. And so if we're working real hard and we have shallow breathing, that's essentially what we're doing to ourselves, is we're starving our mitochondria and our muscles of the oxygen they need to produce energy aerobically, which means we're not going to run very fast and it's going to hurt a lot. So if we're going to be running, we might as well have a good time, and we might as well run fast for however hard we're working. So breathing rhythm helps us do this. One, it helps regulate the rate at which we're breathing, because we're matching our breathing up with the rest of our body mechanics that'll help ensure that we're not hyperventilating, because it's very difficult to move your arms and legs fast enough to hyperventilate if you're matching your breathing rhythm to your arms and your legs. This is also why you recover better if you're walking or an easy jog than if you're just standing still, because you're going to unintentionally try to match your breathing rhythm to your arms and your legs movement. By matching our breathing rhythm with our foot strikes and our arm movements, it'll help pump the air in and out of our lungs just because of the natural tension created and the relaxations that our muscles go through our core throughout the course of our legs cycling over and our arms pumping. And you can do this sitting still. If you do this, you can feel the tension on your lungs on one side and then the other as your arms go back and forth. Same deal if you're running and you got your legs moving. You can feel those core muscles engaging and disengaging on each step, and that's going to help drive that action in your lungs. So the most common breathing rhythms, if we're working super hard it's going to be a 1-to-1 ratio. It'll be like 1 step breathing in, 1 step breathing out. Breathing in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. More useful for endurance athletes, if we're working really hard, it'll be a 1-to-2 ratio. So we'll inhale on 1 step, and then we'll take 2 breaths exhaling. And then we'll inhale for 1 step, and 2 breaths exhaling. This is also kind of similar to swimming. When we're swimming, the ratios can vary a little bit just because of the mechanics of swimming and being in the pool. But the general formula of the harder you're working, the more frequently you're breathing, is probably going to hold true for the entire aerobic scale. The next step up, and this is one used by most endurance athletes when we're running, is 2-to-2. So it'll be 2 steps breathing, 2 steps breathing in, 2 steps breathing out. 2 steps breathing in, out, out, in, out, out, in, out, out. And if you're taking full deep breaths, that's going to be plenty of gas exchange to fuel really hard threshold and VO2 max work. Now, if we're backing it off, we're going a little bit easier, maybe we're going marathon pace or just an easy pace, assuming you have the cardiovascular capacity to deliver high amounts of oxygen from your lungs to your muscles, you can use a 3-to-3 ratio or a 4-to-4 ratio of in, out, 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 in, out, 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 out. But it's hard to maintain at higher intensities. Now, if you only have the physiology to be able to burn so much oxygen at once, if you're really new and you haven't done the training to really stimulate a lot of mitochondrial growth and production in your legs and the big muscles you're using, you can only burn oxygen so fast. So you may be able to maintain some of those longer duration rhythms, the 3-to-3 or 4-to-4 at higher intensities. What's a higher intensity for you? Simply because that rate of gas exchange isn't the limiting factor for you being able to do the work. It's your ability to turn that oxygen, burn the oxygen in order to make the ATP. As a general rule of thumb, if you're working fairly hard, threshold, interval, VO2 max pace, somewhere in that kind of 75 to 95% maximal effort range, that 2-to-2 ratio of 2 steps breathing in, 2 steps breathing out, is probably going to be where you want to be. So to wrap it up, we got 2 really important aspects of breathing when it comes to endurance athletics. One is breathing with full diaphragmatic breathing, getting that full amount of gas exchange so we're not hyperventilating. The second is to breathe with rhythm. We're not just second blowing, we're breathing with rhythm. By combining full deep breaths with a rhythm, we will be able to get maximal amount of gas exchange, and we're going to be able to run, swim, and bike faster for less effort for a longer duration. And that's what we're all after, right? So, stay tuned, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification button, share it on Facebook, Instagram, whatever your social media platform of choice is, and stay tuned. Until next time, train smart.